The warm glow of candlelight flickered across the grand dining hall of Olivia Carter's New York penthouse. Laughter and conversation filled the space as guests sipped champagne, their glasses clinking in celebration. It was Olivia's 40th birthday, a night she had spent weeks planning down to the finest detail. The floral arrangements, the gourmet catering, the elegant place cards. Every aspect of the evening reflected the sophistication and grace she had cultivated over years of building both her career and her marriage. Yet, as the night unfolded, something in her husband's demeanor felt off. Daniel Carter, a high-profile corporate attorney, had insisted on hosting the party at home instead of the lavish restaurant Olivia had originally chosen. "It'll be more intimate," he had said with that polished, reassuring smile, the same one he had perfected over their 15 years of marriage. At the time, she had dismissed the hesitation in her gut, convincing herself that he simply wanted a more personal celebration. That unease lingered as she moved through the room, accepting birthday wishes from friends, family, and colleagues. But when she went searching for Daniel to share a moment together, he was nowhere to be found. "Have you seen Daniel?" she asked Rachel, her best friend, who stood by the balcony sipping champagne. Rachel's brows furrowed slightly as she scanned the crowd. "I think he went inside with Vanessa," she said, her voice holding a note of something Olivia couldn't quite place. Vanessa Brooks, Daniel's assistant of the past 8 months. Young, ambitious, and always impeccably dressed. Olivia had noticed the way Vanessa looked at Daniel, subtle but intentional. She had seen how closely they worked together, how Daniel's late nights at the office had increased since Vanessa's arrival. But she had brushed off her suspicions, chalking it up to the pressures of Daniel's demanding career. Determined to shake off the unsettling feeling creeping up her spine, Olivia excused herself and made her way toward Daniel's study. As she approached, she noticed the door was slightly ajar, the warm light spilling into the dimly lit hallway. She was about to call out his name when she heard hushed voices. "Everything's prepared." Vanessa's silky voice floated through the doorway. "I've double-checked all the documents. Once you serve her the papers tonight, there's nothing she can do." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She pressed her hand against the doorframe, her world tilting beneath her feet. "You're sure about the timing?" Daniel's voice was steady, the tone he used when strategizing in the courtroom. "After the party seems cruel." "It's perfect timing," Vanessa replied, her voice laced with satisfaction. "She'll be emotional, vulnerable, more likely to sign quickly without scrutinizing everything. We've worked too hard to let her find out about the offshore accounts or the property transfers." A sharp ringing filled Olivia's ears, drowning out the party noise in the background. Through the narrow gap in the door, she could see them clearly. Vanessa perched on the edge of Daniel's desk, her silk skirt riding up just enough to reveal more than necessary. Daniel leaned back in his leather chair, the divorce papers spread between them like a carefully calculated battle plan. "You're brilliant, you know that?" Daniel murmured, reaching for Vanessa's hand. "I couldn't have planned this without you." Olivia felt her stomach twist as Vanessa leaned down, pressing a slow, deliberate kiss to his lips. They had done this before, probably countless times, right here in her home. She took a step back, her body trembling. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of devotion, of love, of sacrifice. And this was how it was going to end? On her birthday, in front of their closest friends and family, in a humiliating public ambush? Diana was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, concern etched across her face. "What's wrong?" she whispered, taking in Olivia's pale complexion. Olivia swallowed the lump in her throat and forced herself to stand tall. "I need your help," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "And I need you to call your brother." Diana's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't hesitate. "Ethan." Olivia nodded. "Daniel thinks he can outmaneuver me. He thinks I'm going to sign away everything without a fight. He has no idea what's coming." Ethan Miller was one of the best forensic accountants in the industry. He had uncovered some of the biggest financial frauds in the country, exposing men just like Daniel who thought they could manipulate the system and their wives without consequence. If Daniel believed he could hide money from her, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Diana nodded, already pulling out her phone. "Whatever you need," she said, her voice firm with determination. "But first, we need to get through this party without letting them know you've discovered their plan." Olivia inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She had learned one thing from Daniel after all those years of watching him in court. Sometimes the best defense was making your opponent believe they were winning. "Help me fix my makeup," she said to Diana, straightening her shoulders. "We have a party to host." In the powder room, she met her own reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at her was different. Her eyes were harder, her smile sharper. This wasn't the face of a woman about to be blindsided by divorce. No, this was the face of someone about to turn the tables. By the time Olivia returned to the party, she was composed, gracious, and poised, every bit the charming hostess. She accepted birthday wishes with effortless grace, even as her mind raced with strategies. Across the room, Daniel and Vanessa had returned, standing apart just enough to maintain propriety, yet close enough for Olivia to notice the way they exchanged knowing glances. Daniel raised his glass toward her, that familiar polished smile in place. "To my beautiful wife," he announced to the gathered crowd. "Happy birthday, darling." Olivia lifted her own glass of champagne, meeting his gaze with a smile so flawless he had no reason to doubt it. "Thank you, my love," she replied, her voice smooth and warm. Let him think he still had the upper hand. Let him believe his plan was flawless. Because while Daniel had spent months plotting Olivia's downfall, he had made one fatal mistake. He had underestimated her. And by the time he realized it, it would already be too late. The last of the guests departed just before midnight, leaving behind the remnants of Olivia's ruined birthday celebration. Champagne glasses sat half empty on the tables. The scent of roses, once comforting, now felt suffocatingly sweet. She stood by the large bay window in the dimly lit living room, watching as Daniel walked Vanessa to her car. Even from a distance, she could see their careful movements, bodies maintaining just enough space to avoid suspicion from anyone watching, but close enough for their whispered exchange to be unmistakable. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne glass as she watched them, rage coiling in her chest. Daniel had spent months planning this, positioning himself perfectly to dismantle their marriage on his terms. He had calculated every move, ensuring that Olivia would be too blindsided, too devastated to fight back. What he had not accounted for, however, was the fact that Olivia had no intention of playing the role of the helpless, discarded wife. "You need to be thinking clearly right now," Diana murmured as she gently pried the champagne flute from Olivia's grip. "Breaking that glass won't help you." Olivia exhaled slowly, nodding. "You're right. I need precision. Calculation. The same skills I used to build my business while Daniel was climbing the ranks of his law firm." Diana's brother, Ethan, had arrived 30 minutes earlier. He sat at the dining table, scrolling through his laptop, already combing through financial records Olivia had sent him. His expression was unreadable, but Olivia knew that if Daniel had hidden assets, Ethan would find them. "All right," Ethan finally said, closing his laptop with a quiet snap. "If Daniel thinks he can hide money from you, he's in for a rude awakening." Olivia crossed her arms. "How bad is it?" "Bad," Ethan admitted, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "He's been transferring money out of your joint accounts in small, strategic amounts for nearly a year. Always just under reporting thresholds. He's funneled money into at least 3 offshore accounts, all tied to shell corporations that on paper have nothing to do with him." Olivia's stomach twisted, but she forced herself to stay composed. "And the properties?" Ethan pulled up a file on his screen, angling it toward her. He purchased a beachfront condo in Miami 6 months ago, paid in full through a Delaware-based LLC, with Vanessa listed as a director. A bitter laugh escaped Olivia's lips. Of course, the same woman who is helping him divorce me is also the woman he's been building a new life with. He's careful, Ethan continued. Everything is designed to make it look like you were financially reckless, that you drained the accounts while he tried to be the responsible one. But he made a few mistakes. Diana leaned forward. Like what? For one, Ethan said, pulling up another document, he got greedy. If he had just siphoned off a moderate amount, it might have been harder to track. But he's been moving money from your joint account, your business accounts, and even from charitable donations. The transactions don't line up. Some of this money was meant to go to the Children's Hospital fundraiser Olivia's company sponsored last year. Olivia's breath caught. Wait, you're saying Daniel stole from the charity? Ethan nodded grimly. That's exactly what I'm saying. He redirected a $500,000 donation through a dummy account before moving it offshore. If this goes public, it won't just be a messy divorce. He'll be facing federal charges. A cold realization settled over Olivia. Daniel wasn't just trying to outmaneuver her in a divorce. He had built his entire strategy on fraud and deception. But now she had something he didn't expect. She had proof. We can use this, she said, her mind already forming a plan. But we have to move carefully. If Daniel realizes we know, he'll try to cover his tracks. Then we don't let him know, Ethan agreed. We keep everything business as usual while we build an airtight case against him. Diana crossed her arms. Which means you have to act like the loving, oblivious wife for a little longer. Olivia exhaled, nodding. I can do that. But while I play my role, I need you two to dig deeper. I want every piece of evidence documented. And I need Marcus Bennett. The divorce attorney? Ethan asked. One of the best, Olivia confirmed. Daniel thinks he's the strategist, but I'm about to show him what a real counterattack looks like. The next few weeks were a delicate game of deception. Olivia played the part of the devoted wife flawlessly, hosting charity events, attending law firm galas, and maintaining the perfect facade. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, her team worked tirelessly, gathering the final pieces of the puzzle. Then the perfect opportunity presented itself. Daniel's biggest case of the year, the Anderson trial, was set to go to court. A high-profile fraud case that would solidify his reputation as one of the most successful corporate attorneys in the country. Daniel was so focused on the details of the trial that he didn't even notice when Olivia was added to the witness list. On the first day of trial, the courtroom was filled with reporters, lawyers, and high-profile clients eager to watch Daniel in action. He carried himself with his usual confidence, believing he had the case under control. But he didn't see Olivia in the gallery. Not until her name was called to the stand. Daniel's head snapped up in shock as Olivia walked to the witness stand, her posture composed, her expression unreadable. He glanced at his legal team, confusion evident in his sharp movements. This wasn't part of the plan. As she took her oath, Daniel's perfect world started to crack. Mrs. Carter, the prosecutor began. Can you confirm your professional relationship with Anderson Properties? Yes, Olivia answered smoothly. Through my interior design firm, I have been responsible for the renovations and staging of multiple Anderson Properties developments. Daniel's jaw clenched. And in your financial dealings with Anderson Properties, the prosecutor continued, did you notice any irregularities in the transactions related to project funding? Yes, Olivia said, her voice steady. In fact, upon reviewing my company's financial records, I discovered discrepancies in payments that were supposed to be allocated to project budgets, but were instead rerouted to personal accounts under shell corporations. The courtroom went silent. Do you have evidence of these discrepancies? I do, Olivia said, handing over the meticulously documented financial records Ethan had helped compile, including records of unauthorized transfers from client funds. Daniel shot to his feet. Objection! These documents were not part of the discovery process. Actually, the prosecutor interrupted. They were submitted last week. Perhaps you overlooked them. Daniel's perfect composure shattered as the courtroom erupted in whispers. He had been so focused on controlling the Anderson case that he never even considered that Olivia had been building a case of her own. For the next hour, Olivia laid out every piece of evidence. Each transaction, every hidden asset, every fraudulent move Daniel had made. By the time she stepped down from the witness stand, the damage was done. The jury was engaged. The media had their story. And Daniel Carter had lost the one case he couldn't afford to lose. 2 weeks later, Olivia boarded a private jet to Miami with Daniel, just as he had planned. He still believed he was in control, that she was oblivious to his schemes. But the moment they stepped onto the private beach where he intended to serve her divorce papers, the tables turned. Waiting for them were FBI agents, attorneys, and a handful of Daniel's defrauded clients. Daniel's smirk disappeared the moment he saw them. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice laced with panic. "This," Olivia said, stepping forward, "is your perfect moment, Daniel. Isn't this where you plan to blindside me? The beach where we honeymooned." Before he could respond, the FBI agent spoke. "Daniel Carter, you are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement." The color drained from his face as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. Vanessa, who had flown in separately, watched in horror as Daniel was led away, her perfect fantasy crumbling before her eyes. "You should call a lawyer," Olivia told her, her voice calm. "You'll need one." As she watched Daniel being driven away, Olivia exhaled, a sense of finality washing over her. He had spent months orchestrating his betrayal, believing he had the perfect plan. But he had made one fatal mistake. He had underestimated the woman he had betrayed. And now he was the one paying the price. The morning after Daniel's arrest, Olivia stood on the balcony of her Miami hotel suite, looking out at the ocean. The waves crashed against the shore, rhythmic and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded the night before. The sky was painted in soft hues of pink and gold, marking the beginning of a new day, one that no longer belonged to Daniel Carter. A part of her had expected to feel hollow, to grieve the 15 years she had spent with him, the memories they had built, the love she once believed was real. But standing there, breathing in the salty air, she felt none of that. Instead, she felt a quiet strength settle deep in her bones. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of something else entirely. Behind her, the hotel room was buzzing with activity. Diana was on the phone with reporters, managing the media storm that had erupted after Daniel's arrest. Ethan was finalizing the financial paperwork that ensured Olivia had full control over her assets. Marcus, her divorce attorney, was in the sitting area, reviewing the final settlement agreement. "They're offering a deal," Marcus said, breaking the silence as Olivia walked inside. "Daniel is willing to sign the divorce papers today in exchange for a reduced sentence recommendation." Olivia arched an eyebrow. "Let me guess. He suddenly wants to negotiate now that he's in handcuffs?" Marcus smirked. "More or less. His legal team knows the evidence against him is airtight. If he fights, he'll be looking at decades in prison. If he cooperates, they might cut his sentence down, but it won't change the outcome. He's lost everything, his firm, his career, his assets." A flicker of satisfaction warmed Olivia's chest. Daniel had spent months preparing to serve her divorce papers, fully expecting to walk away with everything. Now he was the one with nothing, while she had secured not just her business, but the future he had tried to take from her. "Send the papers over," Olivia said, sitting down at the table. "Let's make it official." Hours later, as Olivia and her team prepared to leave for the airport, Diana's phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at it and let out a low whistle. "You're going to want to see this," she said, turning her phone toward Olivia. It was a news alert. Breaking. Prominent New York attorney Daniel Carter faces federal charges for fraud and embezzlement. The article detailed how Daniel's crimes have been exposed, how his fraudulent financial dealings have been uncovered not only by law enforcement, but by his own wife. The media was eating up the scandal, painting Olivia as the brilliant, wronged woman who had outsmarted one of the city's most powerful lawyers. A video clip accompanied the article. Olivia pressed play, and there he was, Daniel, being escorted out of a Miami courthouse in handcuffs, his once impeccable suit wrinkled, his expression a mixture of rage and humiliation. Reporters shouted questions at him, cameras flashed, and the world watched as his empire crumbled. Vanessa Brooks was nowhere to be seen. "Guess she didn't stick around," Diana mused. "Of course not," Olivia said, setting the phone down. Vanessa was never in love with Daniel. She was in love with what he could give her. Now that he has nothing, she'll disappear, just like he planned to do to me. Diana studied Olivia for a moment before speaking. "You know, you don't have to go back to New York right away. You could stay here for a while. Take a real break. A fresh start." Olivia smiled, touched by the offer. "Tempting," she admitted. "But I have too much work to do. My business, the foundation, we're just getting started." Diana nodded. "Then let's go home and finish what we started." The return to New York was met with a media frenzy. Olivia's name was everywhere: morning news segments, business columns, online forums. Strangers stopped her on the street to offer words of support, while former acquaintances who had once admired Daniel now pretended they had always suspected he was a fraud. The law firm Daniel had once worked for, Harrison and Palmer, had wasted no time distancing themselves from him. Within days of his arrest, they had issued a public statement condemning his actions and launching an internal audit of all his past cases. But the damage was done. Clients were pulling their accounts, investors were backing away, and the firm's reputation was in freefall. Meanwhile, Olivia's interior design business was thriving. Clients who had once been hesitant to work with her because of her connection to Daniel were now eager to sign contracts. Her inbox was flooded with requests from high-profile developers, eager to align themselves with the woman who had taken down one of the city's most notorious fraudsters. And then there was the foundation. What had started as an idea, a way to help other women protect themselves financially, was now becoming a reality. With Ethan's expertise in forensic accounting, Diana's connections in the art world, and Marcus's legal knowledge, Olivia had built a team dedicated to providing women with the resources they needed to understand their finances, protect their assets, and never find themselves in the position she had once been in. One afternoon, as she reviewed the final paperwork for the foundation's launch, Rachel, her assistant, entered her office with a letter in hand. "It's from Margaret Dawson," Rachel said, placing the envelope on Olivia's desk. Margaret had been Daniel's longtime secretary before she had been forced into early retirement, a calculated move that allowed Vanessa to take her place. Olivia had always suspected Margaret knew more than she had let on, but until now, she hadn't heard from her. She opened the letter and read the handwritten note inside. "Dear Olivia, I saw the news about Daniel's arrest, and I wanted to reach out. I tried to warn you in my own way, but I know now that words wouldn't have been enough. You had to see the truth for yourself. I'm proud of the way you fought back. If you ever need someone with my experience on your side, I'd be honored to work with you. Consider this my official job application. With respect, Margaret Dawson." Olivia smiled. Margaret would be a valuable addition to the foundation, not just because of her experience, but because she understood the importance of paying attention to the warning signs, the ones Olivia had once ignored. She picked up her phone and dialed Margaret's number. "Margaret, it's Olivia. I'd love to discuss your application. A year later, Olivia stood in front of a packed audience at the annual Women's Financial Empowerment Conference, held in the same ballroom where she had once attended events as Daniel's wife. Now she stood there as the keynote speaker, no longer defined by her past but by the future she was building. Betrayal doesn't define you, she told the audience. It reveals you. It shows you exactly who you are when everything you believed in falls apart. When I discovered my husband's deception, I had two choices. I could crumble or I could rise. I chose to rise. The crowd erupted into applause, but Olivia wasn't finished. Financial independence isn't just about money, she continued. It's about power. Knowledge is power. Documentation is power. And most importantly, supporting other women is power. That's why I started the Olivia Carter Foundation, to ensure that no woman is ever blindsided the way I was. As she spoke, she saw familiar faces in the crowd: Diana, Rachel, Ethan, Marcus. Even Margaret sat in the back, nodding in approval. They had all played a role in helping her rebuild, in ensuring that she didn't just survive Daniel's betrayal, but thrived because of it. Later that evening, as she walked through the city streets, she thought about how much had changed in just 1 year. Daniel was serving a 15-year sentence in federal prison. Vanessa had disappeared from the public eye, her dreams of a wealthy future shattered. Harrison and Palmer had barely survived the scandal, now operating under a new name, their former prestige lost forever. And Olivia? She was free. Free to build, to grow, to write her own story on her own terms. Daniel had thought he was writing the final chapter of their marriage. Instead, he had only written the prologue. The real story, the one Olivia was writing for herself, was just beginning. 1 year had passed since Olivia Carter had uncovered the ultimate betrayal on her 40th birthday. A year since she had stood frozen in the doorway of her husband's study, listening to him and his mistress' plan to blindside her with divorce papers. A year since she had made the decision not to crumble under the weight of deception but to rise above it. Today, she was no longer the woman who had been betrayed. She was no longer Daniel Carter's wife. She was Olivia Carter, successful entrepreneur, financial advocate, and a woman who had reclaimed her power. As she stepped onto the stage at the New York Women's Leadership Summit, applause erupted throughout the grand ballroom. The energy in the room was electric, filled with women from all walks of life: executives, entrepreneurs, survivors, and those seeking inspiration. The moment was surreal, yet it felt like the most natural thing in the world. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before addressing the crowd. "A year ago, I thought my life was over," Olivia began, her voice strong and unwavering. "I discovered that the man I had built a life with was not only planning to leave me, but had been systematically working to take everything I had built for myself. He thought I would crumble. He thought I would accept my fate and walk away with nothing. But what he didn't realize was that his betrayal didn't destroy me. It awakened me." The room fell into a hushed silence as Olivia continued. "When we talk about financial independence, we don't just mean money. We mean knowledge. We mean security. We mean control over our own lives. I stand before you today not as a victim of betrayal, but as proof that no one, not a husband, not a company, not a system, can take away what you fight to protect." From the corner of the stage, Diana sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Beside her was Ethan, who had been instrumental in uncovering Daniel's hidden assets, and Marcus, whose legal expertise had ensured Daniel's downfall. Margaret, Daniel's former secretary who had been forced into early retirement, sat beside them, now one of Olivia's most trusted employees at her foundation. The Olivia Carter Foundation had grown beyond her wildest expectations. What had started as a personal mission to ensure no woman was ever blindsided the way she had been had turned into a full-scale movement. Her foundation provided financial education, legal support, and resources for women looking to protect themselves from financial manipulation. In the past year alone, They had helped over 10,000 women secure their financial independence. As she concluded her speech, the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. The applause thundered through the ballroom, but Olivia didn't need their validation. She had already won. As Olivia stepped down from the stage, her assistant, Rachel, approached her with an unreadable expression. "You might want to see this," Rachel said, handing her a phone. Olivia took the device and glanced at the screen. It was a breaking news article. Disgraced attorney Daniel Carter denied early parole amid new evidence of financial misconduct. A slow smile spread across Olivia's face. She skimmed through the article, learning that Daniel, still serving his 15-year sentence, had petitioned for early parole. His argument? That he had been a model inmate and had learned from his mistakes. But his request had been swiftly denied when new evidence surfaced. Evidence that he had attempted to orchestrate another financial scheme from behind bars, using connections from his old life. He never learns, does he? Diana mused as she glanced at the article. No, Olivia replied, shaking her head. And that's exactly why he lost. Daniel had spent his entire life believing he was untouchable, that he could manipulate people and systems to his advantage. But he had underestimated Olivia. He had thought he could walk away unscathed, leaving her broken in his wake. Instead, he was sitting in a prison cell while she was standing on a stage changing lives. There was something poetic about it. Later that evening, Olivia sat in the rooftop lounge of her new penthouse, overlooking the glittering skyline of New York City. The view stretched endlessly before her. A city filled with opportunity, with new beginnings. Diana and Rachel joined her, glasses of champagne in hand. To Olivia Carter, Diana toasted, raising her glass. The woman who turned betrayal into an empire. Olivia laughed, clinking her glass with theirs. To us. To never letting anyone write our endings for us. As they sipped their drinks, Olivia's mind drifted to everything that had happened in the past year. The Olivia Carter Foundation was expanding, with new offices opening in Chicago and Los Angeles. Major corporations were partnering with her to implement financial literacy programs. Women from all backgrounds were reaching out, sharing their stories, thanking her for giving them the tools to take control of their futures. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt at peace. What's next? Rachel asked, watching Olivia with a knowing look. Olivia smiled, setting down her glass. More. More growth, more expansion, more women taking control of their lives. We're just getting started. Diana leaned back against the railing, studying Olivia thoughtfully. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't walked in on them that night? Olivia considered the question for a moment before shaking her head. I used to, she admitted. But now? No. Because the truth is, I was always meant to find out. I was always meant to rise from it. This life, this version of me, it was always waiting. I just had to claim it. And she had. Olivia had reclaimed her life, her power, her future. Daniel Carter had thought he was writing the final chapter of her story, but he had only written his own downfall. Her story was still being written, and this time she held the pen. This final installment of Olivia's journey brings her full circle. Her triumph, her empowerment, and her commitment to helping others. It ties up loose ends while solidifying her transformation into a woman who not only survived betrayal, but thrived beyond it. Let me know if you need any refinements. 1 year, 6 months, and 13 days had passed since Olivia Carter had discovered the betrayal that shattered her marriage. But instead of breaking her, it had transformed her. The woman she had been before, naive, trusting, believing in the illusion of security, no longer existed. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and completely in control of her own destiny. She had spent those months rebuilding everything that Daniel had tried to take from her. Now she stood at the grand opening of the Olivia Carter Foundation headquarters, a state-of-the-art facility in downtown Manhattan, dedicated to providing financial education and legal support to women facing financial manipulation and deceit. The glass building gleamed in the morning light, a symbol of resilience and power. Inside, the reception area was buzzing with activity. The foundation had grown exponentially, now offering programs in multiple cities, partnering with legal firms, financial advisors, and organizations that supported women's empowerment. Olivia had turned her pain into a mission, and the results were undeniable. As she walked through the lobby, she spotted Diana, who had taken on the role of Director of Public Relations, ensuring the foundation's message reached as many women as possible. Rachel was leading a workshop on financial independence, her voice confident as she guided a group of women through their first budgeting session. Margaret, the former secretary who had once worked under Daniel, was now head of the Legal Resources Division, using her knowledge to help women protect themselves from the very traps Olivia had once fallen into. This was her legacy. Olivia's phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced down and smirked as she read the headline. Daniel Carter convicted on all counts, faces 25-year sentence. She tapped the article and quickly scanned the details. The trial had been long and brutal, with the prosecution laying out every fraudulent scheme Daniel had orchestrated. His involvement in offshore accounts, embezzlement, financial fraud, and the illegal redirection of charity funds had sealed his fate. Even his high-priced defense team couldn't save him. Vanessa Brooks, his former mistress, had testified against him in exchange for a reduced sentence, painting herself as a victim of his manipulation. Olivia had no sympathy for her. Vanessa had been just as complicit in the scheme, believing she would benefit from Daniel's wealth and influence. Instead, she had watched as his empire crumbled, leaving her with nothing. Olivia's lips curled into a satisfied smile. There was no escaping justice now. Good news? Diana asked, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. Olivia held up her phone. It's over. He's been convicted on every count. Diana raised an eyebrow. And how do you feel? Olivia considered the question carefully. Once she might have felt a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, maybe even a hint of lingering bitterness. But now? Vindicated, she admitted. Not because he's behind bars, but because he didn't get away with it. Because he thought he could destroy me, and instead I built something bigger than he ever could. Diana smirked. And because the entire world knows you won. Olivia laughed softly, taking a sip of her coffee. That too. Later that afternoon, Olivia had a meeting scheduled with a woman who had reached out through the foundation's hotline. She had been told it was urgent. As she entered her office, she found a nervous-looking woman in her late 30s standing near the window, hands clasped tightly in front of her. Miss Carter, I wasn't sure you'd meet with me personally, the woman stammered. Olivia gave her a warm, reassuring smile. Please call me Olivia. And of course I wanted to meet you. Your message sounded important. The woman hesitated before taking a deep breath. My name is Claire Matthews. My husband is, well, he's powerful. A lawyer like your ex-husband was. And I think he's hiding money from me. I think he's planning to leave me, and I don't know where to start. Olivia nodded, instantly recognizing the fear in Claire's voice, the same fear she had once felt. You've already started by reaching out, Olivia said gently, and you've come to the right place. Over the next hour, Olivia listened as Claire laid out the warning signs. Sudden changes in financial access, late-night phone calls, unexplained bank withdrawals. It was all too familiar. But unlike Olivia, Claire didn't have to face it alone. By the time their meeting ended, Claire was armed with resources, financial checklists, and the support of the foundation. She wouldn't be blindsided. She would be ready. As Claire left, Olivia sat back in her chair, exhaling slowly. This was why she had built the foundation, to ensure that no woman ever had to go through what she had, unprepared and unprotected. This was what victory looked like. That evening, as Olivia settled into her penthouse, she received an unexpected message. It was from an unknown number, but she recognized it instantly. "Elizabeth, please. One last conversation. Just you and me. Daniel." She stared at the message, fingers hovering over the keyboard. A part of her wondered what he could possibly want. An apology? Closure? An attempt to manipulate her one last time? She shook her head and deleted the message. Daniel Carter was nothing more than a ghost of the past, and she had no interest in looking back. Instead, she poured herself a glass of wine, stepped onto her balcony, and looked out over the city she had reclaimed for herself. She had built something lasting, something meaningful. She had turned pain into power, betrayal into strength, and she had won. As the city lights flickered below, Olivia smiled to herself. Daniel had believed he was writing the final chapter of her story, but he had only written the prologue. Her story was still being written, and this time it was entirely her own. 6 months later, Olivia stood before another packed audience, this time at the Global Women's Summit in Los Angeles. The foundation had expanded internationally, its mission reaching beyond borders, helping women in different countries take control of their financial futures. She adjusted the microphone, scanning the room before speaking. "Betrayal does not define us," she began. "It reveals us. It forces us to see who we truly are, what we are capable of, and how we rise after we fall." The audience listened intently, many of them nodding in silent agreement. For too long, we have been taught to trust blindly, to believe that love will protect us from deception. But the truth is, trust without knowledge is not security, it's vulnerability. And we deserve better than that. We deserve to be empowered, to be in control of our own lives, our own finances, our own futures. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "A year ago, I stood on a different stage, telling my story for the first time. But today, I am here not just to share my past, but to shape the future. The Olivia Carter Foundation is not just my legacy, it's a movement. And I invite each of you to be part of it." The applause that followed was deafening. As she stepped down from the stage, Diana, Rachel, and Ethan were waiting for her, their expressions filled with pride. "You're changing lives, Olivia," Rachel said softly. Olivia smiled, glancing around at the women who had gathered, each of them seeking strength, guidance, and the knowledge to protect themselves. "I know," she said, "and I'm just getting started." With that, she walked forward, ready to embrace whatever came next. Because this was not the end. It was only the beginning. This final chapter solidifies Olivia's transformation from a betrayed wife to a powerful leader. She not only ensures justice for herself but creates a lasting impact that empowers thousands of women. Daniel, once the mastermind of deceit, is now nothing more than a cautionary tale, while Olivia writes her own legacy, one that is far greater than anything he could have imagined. Her story is no longer about revenge, it's about victory. And in the end, Olivia Carter does not just survive. She thrives. The sun cast a golden glow over the New York skyline as Olivia Carter stood on the balcony of her penthouse, sipping a steaming cup of coffee. The city below buzzed with life, its towering skyscrapers reflecting the promise of a new day. It had been nearly 2 years since the night that changed everything, the night she overheard her husband plotting to discard her like an afterthought. In the months that followed, she had unraveled his deception, turned the tables, and built a new life from the ashes of their broken marriage. Now, as she watched the world move forward, she realized she was no longer looking back. Her mornings used to be filled with dread, spent pretending that everything was fine while Daniel crafted his web of lies. Now they were hers alone, filled with purpose, peace, and the unwavering certainty that she had taken control of her own story. She no longer woke up to an empty side of the bed, haunted by what had been. Instead, she woke up to herself, strong, independent, and completely free. Her phone buzzed on the marble counter. Olivia glanced at the screen and smiled. A message from Diana. "Big meeting today. Ready to take on the world? Olivia chuckled before typing back. Always. The meeting in question was with a major financial firm looking to partner with the Olivia Carter Foundation. It was a collaboration that could take their work to new heights, reaching thousands more women who needed financial education and legal support. Olivia had built something bigger than herself, something that had grown far beyond her own experience with betrayal. And today she was about to take it even further. She arrived at the foundation's headquarters to find her team already in motion. Rachel was on the phone confirming details for the afternoon press conference, while Ethan was reviewing financial documents, ensuring everything was in order for the deal. Diana was in the conference room, preparing for the meeting, her energy as contagious as ever. "You look like you didn't sleep," Olivia noted as she took a seat beside her. Diana rolled her eyes. "Sleep is for people who aren't building an empire. You know that." Olivia laughed, shaking her head. "I appreciate your dedication, but you should at least try to get some rest." "I'll rest when we seal this deal," Diana replied. "Which, by the way, is practically guaranteed. They want this partnership just as much as we do." That much was clear. The foundation had made headlines over the past year, gaining national attention for its impact. They had helped thousands of women secure their financial independence, navigate difficult divorces, and protect themselves from financial abuse. What had started as Olivia's personal battle had become a full-scale movement, changing lives in ways she never could have imagined. The meeting was a success. The financial firm committed to a multi-year partnership, providing resources and funding to expand the foundation's reach. Olivia shook hands with their CEO, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. As she left the conference room, her assistant approached with a hesitant look. "There's something you should know," she said carefully. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Her assistant hesitated before handing over a printed news article. Olivia scanned the headline, her expression unreadable. "Disgraced attorney Daniel Carter requests appeal for reduced sentence." She sighed, setting the paper down on her desk. "Of course he does." Diana, who had been listening from across the room, scoffed. "You'd think he'd accept his fate by now." "Men like Daniel don't accept anything," Olivia said, leaning back in her chair. "They manipulate. They scheme. They look for ways to regain control, even when they've lost everything." The article detailed Daniel's claims that his conviction had been unjust and that he had reformed while in prison. Olivia knew better. He wasn't sorry, he was desperate. "Does this change anything for us?" Ethan asked. Olivia shook her head. "Not at all. The evidence against him was overwhelming. His appeal won't get far." Rachel appeared in the doorway. "Should we make a statement?" Olivia considered it before shaking her head. "No. We don't need to respond. He's trying to pull me back into his mess, and I won't give him that power. Let him fight his losing battle on his own." She had wasted too much of her life being entangled in Daniel's world. She wasn't about to let him pull her back in now. Later that evening, Olivia found herself in her favorite cafe, a quiet spot tucked away in the heart of the city. She sat by the window sipping tea, reflecting on how much had changed. A woman approached hesitantly. "Excuse me, are you Olivia Carter?" Olivia looked up and smiled. "I am." The woman seemed nervous. "I just wanted to say, thank you. I read about your story, about what you've built. Your foundation helped me when I didn't know where to turn." Olivia's heart swelled. "I'm so glad to hear that. How are you doing now?" "Better," the woman said, her voice steady. "Because of you, I got out before it was too late. I have my own bank account now, my own place. And I'm finally free." The words struck a chord deep within Olivia. She reached out, giving the woman's hand a reassuring squeeze. "You did that for yourself. You took control. I'm just glad we could help." The woman nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude before she walked away. As Olivia watched her leave, she felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. This was why she had fought. Why she had refused to let Daniel's betrayal define her. Because every woman deserved the chance to reclaim her power, to rewrite her story. The next morning, Olivia woke up to another news alert. Daniel Carter's appeal rejected. No possibility for early release. She barely reacted, simply setting her phone down and stretching, feeling lighter than she had in years. Daniel had spent his entire life believing he was in control, that he could manipulate and scheme his way out of anything. But now his story had reached its inevitable conclusion. He would remain behind bars, while Olivia continued to build a future without him. That day, she signed a new contract expanding the foundation into Europe, securing partnerships that would allow them to reach women on an international scale. She gave a keynote speech at a major women's conference, inspiring thousands with her story. She attended a gala where she was honored for her work in financial advocacy. And that evening, as she sat on her balcony, sipping a glass of wine, she realized something. For the first time in years, she wasn't fighting anymore. She had won. She had built a life beyond betrayal, beyond pain. A life that was entirely her own. Daniel Carter had thought he was writing the ending of her story, but he had only written his own downfall. Her story was still unfolding, and this time she held the pen. As the city lights twinkled below, Olivia Carter smiled. She was free, and she was just getting started. A soft breeze drifted through the open balcony doors of Olivia Carter's penthouse, carrying the sounds of the city below. She sat curled up on the couch, a cup of tea in hand, reflecting on how drastically her life had changed in just a few years. It wasn't just the physical transformation, from the lavish apartment she once shared with Daniel to the elegant home she had designed for herself. It was something deeper, a shift in her very identity. For years she had defined herself by her marriage, by the image of the perfect wife standing beside a successful man. That woman no longer existed. In her place stood someone who had built something greater than she ever could have imagined. A woman who had taken betrayal and turned it into a movement. A woman who had learned that her worth was not tied to anyone else's name. The Olivia Carter Foundation had grown beyond anything she had initially envisioned. What started as a mission to help women navigate financial deception had become a nationwide initiative. Offices had opened in multiple states, and international branches were now being established in London and Sydney. The foundation was not just about helping women leave bad situations, it was about giving them the tools to never end up in them in the first place. That morning, she had finalized a deal with a major university to incorporate financial literacy courses into their curriculum, ensuring young women would be equipped with the knowledge she had once lacked. It was a victory, not just for her, but for every woman who had been told to trust blindly instead of being encouraged to protect herself. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. A message from Diana. "Dinner tonight? We're celebrating, whether you like it or not." Olivia smiled, shaking her head before responding. "Fine." But no speeches. Diana's reply came instantly. "No promises." Later that evening, Olivia arrived at a private dining lounge where Diana, Rachel, Ethan, and a handful of close friends were already waiting. The restaurant had been booked just for them, a luxury Olivia rarely indulged in, but tonight felt like an occasion worth marking. To Olivia, Diana announced, raising her glass the moment Olivia sat down. "For proving that karma is real and for building an empire out of the ashes of betrayal." Laughter rippled through the group as glasses clinked together. Olivia rolled her eyes but accepted the toast with a small smile. "I'd argue it's less about karma and more about strategy," she said, taking a sip of wine. Ethan smirked. "A little of both, probably. But either way you won." It was true. Daniel's appeal had been denied. His name had become synonymous with fraud and betrayal, a cautionary tale whispered among the legal elite. Meanwhile, Olivia had built something lasting, something that would continue long after his prison sentence ended. As the evening continued, conversations drifted from work to travel to future plans. Olivia listened, enjoying the warmth of being surrounded by people she trusted, something she had once taken for granted. "You should take a break," Rachel suggested as their plates were cleared. "The foundation is running smoothly, the expansion is on track. When was the last time you did something just for you?" Olivia hesitated. She had been so focused on building, on growing, on proving to herself that she could rise from Daniel's betrayal, that she hadn't considered what came next. Diana leaned forward. "Come to Italy with me next month. No meetings. No phone calls. Just wine, art, and sun. It was tempting. The idea of stepping away, even for a little while, felt foreign, but maybe that was exactly why she needed to do it. "I'll think about it," Olivia said, and for the first time, she actually meant it. As the night wound down, she stepped outside to get some air. The city stretched before her, vibrant and alive. She had spent so long fighting, strategizing, ensuring that she never felt powerless again. But for the first time in a long time, she felt something different. She felt free. The next morning, she sat at her office desk, scrolling through an email from a young woman who had attended one of the foundation's workshops. "Because of you, I left before it was too late. Because of you, I know my worth." Olivia exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of those words. This was why she had fought so hard. Not for revenge. Not to prove a point to Daniel or anyone else. But to make sure no one else had to go through what she had, unprepared and alone. As she closed the email, her assistant knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you." "No appointment, but she says it's important." Curious, Olivia nodded. "Send her in." A woman stepped inside, clutching a folder in her hands. She was in her mid-30s, her expression a mixture of nerves and quiet determination. "My name is Emily," she said. "I don't know if you remember me, but we met at an event last year. I was just starting the process of leaving my husband, and you told me to document everything." Olivia did remember. A woman who had approached her hesitantly, still unsure of whether she had the strength to walk away. Emily set the folder on the desk. "I did what you said. And now I have proof that he's been hiding assets. But I don't know what to do next." Olivia opened the folder, scanning the documents. Bank statements, property records, hidden transactions, it was all there. Proof of deception. She looked up, meeting Emily's gaze. "You've already done the hardest part," Olivia said gently. "Now let's make sure you get what you deserve." Emily exhaled, relief evident in her eyes. For Olivia, this was the full circle moment. This was why she had refused to be destroyed by betrayal, so that she could help others do the same. Later that evening, as she sat on her balcony, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The woman she had been before, the one who had trusted blindly, was gone. But the woman she had become, the one who fought, who built, who helped others rise, was exactly who she was always meant to be. Daniel had thought he was writing the final chapter of her story. But he had only written his own downfall. Her story was still being written. And this time, she held the pen. As the city lights glowed below, Olivia took a deep breath. She had won. And she was just getting started. The evening air carried a crisp chill as Olivia Carter sat on her penthouse balcony, her fingers curled around a half-filled glass of wine. The city below was alive, its lights flickering in the distance, reflecting the movement of life happening all around her. From this height, the world seemed quieter, more distant, a stark contrast to the chaos she had once lived through. In moments like these, she allowed herself to breathe, to acknowledge how far she had come since she had been left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. The years following her divorce had been a whirlwind of growth and transformation. She had poured herself into her work, building the Olivia Carter Foundation into an unstoppable force dedicated to helping women secure financial independence. Through dedication and sheer willpower, she had turned her pain into something meaningful, something that mattered. Her business in interior design had also flourished, earning recognition among New York's elite. The woman she had become was no longer defined by the betrayal of her past, but by the resilience she had cultivated in its wake. Yet, despite everything she had accomplished, there was a lingering emptiness that crept in during quiet moments. The success, the independence, the strength, none of it had erased the guarded walls she had built around her heart. The idea of love had once been exciting, a dream woven into the fabric of the life she had once envisioned. Now it felt distant, like something that belonged to someone else. A message on her phone pulled her from her thoughts, the screen glowing softly in the dim light. It was from Ethan Walker, the financial advisor who had become an integral part of her foundation and, more recently, a constant presence in her life. He had been there through the late nights, the high-stress meetings, and the victories that only they truly understood. Their professional relationship had evolved into something effortless, a friendship built on mutual respect and understanding. But beneath it, there had always been something more, something Olivia had deliberately ignored. The message was an invitation to dinner, a simple gesture with no mention of work, no pressing agenda. It was a rare occurrence, one that made her pause. Olivia had spent so much time shielding herself from the possibility of love that she had ignored what was right in front of her. She hesitated for a moment before typing a response, agreeing to meet him. For the first time in years, she felt a quiet thrill at the thought of something unknown. The following evening, Olivia arrived at the intimate French bistro Ethan had chosen. The warm glow of candlelight reflected off the polished wood tables, casting a soft, inviting ambience. The restaurant was quiet, filled with the low hum of conversations and the occasional clink of silverware. It was a stark contrast to the high-end business dinners she was accustomed to. This was something different, something personal. As the evening unfolded, Olivia felt herself letting go in a way she hadn't in years. The conversation flowed easily, unburdened by the weight of work or responsibilities. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to enjoy the company of someone who wasn't expecting anything from her except her presence. She caught herself noticing things she had overlooked before, the ease of his laughter, the warmth in his gaze, the way he listened without interruption. It was different from anything she had experienced before, and that realization unsettled her. Ethan had always been there, steady and reliable, never pushing her beyond what she was ready for. But now, sitting across from him, Olivia recognized that she had been avoiding something inevitable. She had convinced herself that love was a risk she couldn't afford to take, yet here she was, feeling something dangerously close to it. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the idea of opening her heart again or the possibility that she already had. As the evening came to an end, they stepped out onto the quiet street. The city lights glowed in the distance, casting long shadows along the pavement. The air had turned colder, and Olivia instinctively wrapped her arms around herself. A silence settled between them, not uncomfortable but filled with something unspoken. She knew this moment was a turning point, one she couldn't ignore any longer. The realization that she had feelings for Ethan was both exhilarating and terrifying. She had spent so long convincing herself that she was better off alone, that vulnerability was a weakness she couldn't afford. But standing there in the quiet aftermath of a simple dinner, she knew she had reached a crossroads. She could continue pretending that nothing had changed, or she could acknowledge the truth that had been there all along. The weight of her past still lingered, the memories of betrayal and heartbreak never fully fading. But Ethan was not Daniel. He had never given her a reason to doubt him, never made her feel like she had to prove her worth. He had simply been there, waiting patiently for her to realize what she already knew. As she rode home that evening, Olivia stared out the window, her reflection mirroring the city lights beyond the glass. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about the past. She wasn't questioning what had been lost or fearing what might come next. Instead, she was allowing herself to feel, to hope, to consider the possibility of love once more. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with risks she wasn't sure she was ready to take. But for the first time in years, Olivia Carter wasn't running from the unknown. She was walking toward it. The days following Olivia's dinner with Ethan felt different. The foundation continued to demand most of her attention, as did her business ventures, yet there was a shift in how she approached her time with Ethan. Before, their conversations had revolved around work, funding strategies, donor meetings, expansion plans, but now the lines were beginning to blur. It was subtle at first, but undeniable. Ethan had always been perceptive, but Olivia noticed how much more attuned he was to the little things. He knew exactly how she liked her coffee, strong, no sugar, just a splash of oat milk. He noticed how she preferred silence in the early mornings, her thoughts still waking up with the day. He knew her love for art, particularly how she could get lost in a painting, the way she admired the brush strokes and color choices, often tracing them absent-mindedly with her fingers. One evening, as they worked late at the foundation, a power outage left them with only the glow of their laptop screens. The hum of the city outside their office window was the only sound filling the room. Olivia leaned back in her chair, exhausted but unwilling to leave just yet. Ethan sat across from her, watching her carefully. In that quiet moment, without the distractions of their usual responsibilities, their conversation turned unexpectedly personal. Ethan spoke of his past relationships, how his trust had been broken once before. He admitted that opening up wasn't easy for him either, that despite his easygoing nature, he too had walls built from past wounds. Olivia found herself sharing more than she had in years, speaking not just about Daniel's betrayal but the deeper scars it had left, the fear that she would never be able to let someone in again. There was no judgment in Ethan's gaze, no rush to offer solutions or tell her that she should move on. He simply listened, his presence steady, allowing her to be vulnerable without consequence. That night, something shifted between them. Olivia knew that trust wasn't something that happened overnight, but for the first time in a long time, she wanted to try. A few days later, Ethan invited Olivia to dinner, suggesting a quiet, intimate restaurant she hadn't been to before. At first, she assumed it was just another business dinner, an extension of their long work hours together. But when she arrived, she realized this was different. The restaurant was warm and inviting, with dim candlelight reflecting off the rustic brick walls. There was no stack of paperwork waiting for them, no agenda to discuss. Instead, there was just Ethan, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. As the evening unfolded, Olivia found herself letting go in ways she hadn't anticipated. They laughed over shared memories of awkward fundraising events, swapped stories of childhood mishaps, and spoke about dreams beyond their work. She learned things about Ethan she had never known, how he once considered studying architecture before falling in love with finance, how he played the piano in college, how his father's love for travel had instilled in him a deep appreciation for cultures around the world. More than anything, Olivia found herself drawn to how effortlessly he carried himself. He never treated her as fragile, never looked at her with pity or as if she were someone in need of fixing. He saw her strength, respected it, and yet somehow still managed to offer her comfort without diminishing it. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about Daniel or the past. She wasn't questioning whether she should be there, whether she should feel what she was feeling. She simply let herself exist in the moment, something she had nearly forgotten how to do. As they left the restaurant, the city air cool against her skin, Olivia felt a quiet sense of certainty settle in her chest. She wasn't sure what this was yet, but she knew she wasn't ready to walk away from it. The weeks that followed saw a shift in the way Olivia and Ethan moved around each other. Their interactions outside of work became more frequent, spontaneous lunches, weekend strolls through Central Park, quiet moments in between meetings where they would exchange knowing glances. Small touches that neither of them addressed, but neither of them pulled away from. It wasn't rushed, and that was what made it feel real. Olivia was hesitant at first, reluctant to name whatever was forming between them. She had spent so long fearing the idea of love that she wasn't sure she would recognize it even if it was standing right in front of her. But Ethan never pushed. He let her set the pace, his presence unwavering but never forceful. One evening, after a long day at the foundation, they found themselves walking side by side through the city streets. The sidewalks were lined with golden leaves, autumn painting the world in warm tones. They had stopped by a small art gallery earlier, one that Olivia had been meaning to visit but never found the time for. She noticed how Ethan watched her as she admired the pieces, how he seemed more interested in her reactions than the paintings themselves. She had caught his gaze once, a question lingering there, but neither of them had spoken. Later that night, as they reached her building, Olivia hesitated before saying good night. There was something in the air between them, something neither of them could ignore anymore. The moment stretched between them, heavy with the anticipation of an inevitable step forward. Ethan reached up, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, his fingers barely grazing her skin. Olivia closed her eyes for a brief second, allowing herself to feel the warmth of his touch. When she opened them again, he was still watching her, waiting, giving her the space to decide. And for the first time, she didn't hesitate. She leaned forward, her lips brushing against his in a tentative, lingering kiss. It was soft, unhurried, but it carried the weight of every unspoken moment between them. When they pulled apart, there was no uncertainty in Ethan's expression, only quiet understanding. This was different. This wasn't built on deceit or manipulation. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was simply about them. The days after that kiss felt lighter, as if a weight Olivia hadn't realized she was carrying had finally been lifted. She still had her doubts, her fears lingering in the back of her mind, but they weren't enough to make her walk away. Ethan had become a steady presence in her life, someone she could trust, someone who made her believe that love didn't have to be a losing game. Their bond continued to deepen, not just in grand gestures but in the small, quiet moments. It was in the way Ethan would place her coffee on her desk without her having to ask, in the way he listened to her when she spoke, in the way he never shied away from difficult conversations. It was in the way he made her feel safe, not because she needed protection, but because he knew she had spent too long protecting herself. One evening, as they sat in her apartment, the city lights glowing beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Olivia realized something that both terrified and thrilled her. She wanted this. She wanted him. She had spent so long convincing herself that she was better off alone, that love was too dangerous a risk. But Ethan had shown her that love wasn't about losing herself. It was about finding someone who stood beside her, not in front of her, not behind her, but with her. For the first time in years, Olivia Carter wasn't afraid of the future. She was ready to embrace it. And this time she wasn't alone. The invitation to meet Ethan's family came sooner than Olivia expected. They had been seeing each other for a few months now, their relationship deepening in ways that felt natural yet terrifying. She had learned to let her guard down with him, to trust the steady presence he had become in her life. But meeting his family, that was another story. Ethan assured her it was just a formal gathering, a chance for his family to get to know her outside of what they had seen in the media. Olivia had spent years rebuilding herself from the scandal that had once surrounded her name, but she knew how society worked. To people like Ethan's family, old money, well-connected, and deeply private, her past was not something that could be easily overlooked. The evening of the gathering, Olivia arrived at the Walker estate, a sprawling property just outside the city. The house was as grand as she had expected. High ceilings, polished marble floors, and walls lined with portraits of generations past. The kind of home that carried an air of quiet prestige, where appearances were everything. Ethan's parents, Henry and Eleanor Walker, greeted her with polite smiles, but there was something cold behind their carefully measured words. Olivia had spent enough time in high society to recognize the difference between genuine warmth and calculated civility. This was the latter. Throughout the evening, she noticed the way Eleanor watched her, subtle glances exchanged between her and Henry, the way their voices dropped ever so slightly whenever she spoke. The conversation remained pleasant, but the underlying tension was impossible to ignore. It wasn't until dinner was served that the first true jab was made. Eleanor turned to Olivia with an almost sympathetic smile. "Your foundation has certainly gained a lot of attention in recent years. Quite impressive, considering how it all started." There was an unmistakable edge in her tone, one Olivia recognized immediately. It wasn't praise, it was a veiled criticism. "I suppose when you've been through certain experiences," Eleanor continued, "it's only natural to want to turn them into opportunities." Olivia maintained her composure, but she felt the insult beneath the surface. Eleanor wasn't acknowledging the work she had done for thousands of women. She was implying that Olivia had built her success on revenge rather than genuine passion. Ethan, sensing the shift in the conversation, placed a firm hand over Olivia's. "The foundation is changing lives," he said. "It's something to be proud of." Eleanor simply sipped her wine, offering a placid smile. "Of course, dear." It was clear to Olivia then, this wasn't just disapproval. This was judgment, and no matter how polite the words were, the message was undeniable. After dinner, as the guests mingled, Olivia found herself in the garden, taking a moment to breathe. She had handled worse, but something about tonight unsettled her more than she cared to admit. She wasn't imagining things. The way Ethan's sister, Charlotte, had eyed her with suspicion throughout the evening, the quiet remarks exchanged between his parents when they thought she wasn't listening. She had been through enough to recognize when she was being measured and found lacking. Her suspicions were confirmed when she overheard a conversation between Henry and Eleanor as she passed by the library doors, which had been left slightly ajar. "She's a complicated woman, Eleanor." Henry's voice was calm but firm. "And Ethan doesn't need that kind of burden." Eleanor sighed. "He's always had a soft spot for lost causes. But this? Olivia Carter is a woman with baggage, Henry. The kind that never really goes away." Henry's voice was lower now, but Olivia caught every word. "He deserves someone with a cleaner past. Not someone whose name will always be tied to scandal." A chill ran through her. She had known meeting them would be difficult, but hearing them discuss her as if she were a liability rather than a person cut deeper than she expected. Before she could turn away, Charlotte stepped into view, arms crossed as she studied Olivia's face. "You heard them, didn't you?" she asked, her voice lacking any real sympathy. Olivia exhaled slowly. "They're entitled to their opinions." Charlotte tilted her head, eyes sharp. "You're not what they wanted for him. And you know it." Olivia had spent years proving herself in a world that had been eager to see her fail. She wasn't naive enough to believe that she would be welcomed with open arms, but Ethan's family wasn't just skeptical. They saw her as a stain on their carefully cultivated image. "I need to find Ethan," she said finally, brushing past Charlotte without another word. Ethan found her before she could say anything, taking her hand as he led her toward the quieter part of the house. He had sensed the shift in the evening, the growing coldness in his parents' demeanor, and he knew Olivia wouldn't pretend otherwise. "They don't like me," she stated plainly as soon as they were alone. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not about liking you, Olivia. It's about their need for control. They think they know what's best for me, and they don't understand that their opinions don't dictate my life." She searched his face, looking for any sign of hesitation. "And do you?" He met her gaze without hesitation. "I know exactly what I want." She wanted to believe that was enough, but the weight of everything she had overheard pressed down on her. His family's disapproval wasn't just disapproval, it was rejection, and not the kind that would fade with time. "They won't change their minds," she said softly. "Not about me." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then that's their problem, not ours." Olivia wished it were that simple. The night took an irreversible turn when Ethan confronted his father in the study. Olivia had planned to leave, to spare him the inevitable conflict, but Ethan wasn't one to back down. Henry's voice was firm, but there was an edge of frustration as he spoke. "Ethan, you're a smart man. You know what's at stake here. The choices you make reflect on this family, and Olivia Carter." Ethan cut him off, his voice unwavering. "Olivia Carter is the woman I love." A silence fell over the room. Olivia felt her breath catch. Henry's expression didn't change. "Love isn't enough, Ethan." Ethan shook his head, disbelief in his voice. "You don't even know her." "I know enough," Henry replied. "I know the kind of attention she brings, the kind of past she has. And I know that no matter what you believe, she will always be attached to it." Eleanor, standing nearby, placed a gentle hand on Henry's arm. "We just want what's best for you." Ethan's voice was quieter now, but no less firm. "Then trust me to decide what that is." His father exhaled, his disappointment evident. "Don't be foolish, Ethan. This isn't about love. This is about your future." Ethan turned to Olivia, his gaze steady. "She is my future." The weight of his words settled between them, undeniable and unshakable. But Olivia knew what came next. The distance between Ethan and his family would only grow, and she would be the reason for it. She had fought too hard to build herself back up, and she refused to be the reason someone else had to tear their world apart. That night, as Ethan drove her home, Olivia sat in silence, her mind racing. She had spent her life proving she was strong enough to stand on her own, but now she faced a different kind of battle, one where love wasn't the only deciding factor. As he walked her to her door, she turned to him, words forming in her throat before she could stop them. "I need to think," she said finally. Ethan studied her, understanding flickering in his eyes. He nodded, but the fear of what she might decide lingered between them. As she stepped inside, closing the door behind her, Olivia knew that whatever came next would change everything. The silence of Olivia's penthouse felt heavier than usual. The city stretched before her, its lights flickering against the dark sky, but tonight, they felt distant, like a world she could no longer fully belong to. She stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, arms crossed, staring at the streets below but seeing nothing at all. Her mind was a battlefield of emotions, torn between love and logic, between what her heart wanted and what she feared was the right thing to do. She had spent years reclaiming herself, building something strong from the ruins of her past. Every decision she made had been carefully calculated, every move measured to ensure she never fell into a situation where she could be hurt again. Yet here she was, standing at the precipice of a decision that could either lead to something beautiful or break her all over again. Ethan had been patient, understanding in ways she hadn't expected. He had never made her feel like she was a burden, never treated her as fragile, but tonight's confrontation with his family had changed everything. Olivia wasn't naive enough to believe that love alone was enough to fix the divide that now existed between Ethan and his parents. She had seen it in his father's eyes and his mother's carefully measured words. This wasn't a disapproval that would fade with time. Her phone buzzed on the table behind her, and she already knew who it was. "Ethan?" She hesitated before picking it up, reading the message he had sent. "I'm outside." Her heart tightened. She could have ignored it, let the night pass and give herself time to breathe, but she knew Ethan well enough to understand that he wasn't going to leave without saying what he needed to say. Taking a deep breath, she walked to the door and pulled it open. He was standing there, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. The sight of him in the dim hallway sent a fresh wave of uncertainty crashing over her. "I didn't want to leave things like that," he said, his voice steady. "I know what you're thinking, Olivia. And I need you to hear me out." She didn't speak, but she stepped aside, letting him in. The door clicked shut behind them, enclosing them in the quiet, heavy air of her apartment. Ethan turned to face her, his eyes searching hers for something, perhaps a sign that she wouldn't run. "I know what my family said," he continued. "I know what they think. And I know that you think you're making this easier for me by walking away." She lowered her gaze, fingers tightening around the fabric of her sweater. He wasn't wrong. She had spent the past few hours convincing herself that leaving was the right thing to do, not because she didn't love him, but because she did. "They won't accept me, Ethan." Her voice was quiet, but firm. "Not now. Maybe not ever." He exhaled sharply, stepping closer. "That doesn't matter to me." "It should," she argued. "They're your family. They always will be. And you're the woman I love," he countered without hesitation. "That doesn't change just because they don't approve." She swallowed hard. It wasn't that simple, and they both knew it. Love didn't exist in a vacuum. The life he had built, the relationships he had with the people who had raised him, she didn't want to be the reason any of it fractured. "They'll always see me as a mistake," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan shook his head. "Then that's their mistake to make." His certainty was unwavering, but Olivia wasn't sure hers was. She had learned to be cautious, to avoid situations where her heart was left vulnerable, and right now, standing here with him, she felt more exposed than she ever had before. Ethan reached for her hand, his fingers curling gently around hers. "I need you to trust me," he said. "Trust that we can face this together." Olivia's chest ached at his words, at the raw sincerity in his voice. He was offering her something she had convinced herself she would never have again. Someone who was willing to fight for her, not in spite of her past, but because of the person she had become. But was she strong enough to accept it? She pulled her hand away, not because she didn't want him, but because she needed space to think. She turned back toward the window, staring out at the city that had become both her refuge and her battleground. Ethan didn't move to stop her. He simply stood there, waiting. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. If she walked away now, she knew Ethan wouldn't chase her. He would respect her choice. But if she stayed, if she let herself believe in him and them, then she had to be willing to take the risk. For the first time in years, she wasn't sure which path to take. As she stared out over the city, lost in the uncertainty of her own heart, one question remained. Would love be enough? She didn't know. Not yet. In 2025, Olivia and Ethan's story remains deeply relevant in a world where personal and professional lives are more interconnected than ever. Their journey is a reflection of modern challenges, navigating love after trauma, dealing with societal expectations, and making choices that prioritize personal happiness over external approval. As relationships continue to evolve in a digital age dominated by social media, public perception, and family expectations, the lessons from their story serve as a powerful reminder that self-worth and emotional resilience should never be compromised for the sake of acceptance. One of the key takeaways from Olivia's journey is the importance of healing before loving again. After experiencing betrayal, she didn't rush into another relationship but instead took time to rebuild her confidence and create a life she was proud of. This is a crucial lesson in 2025, where relationships often move quickly due to constant digital connectivity. The story reminds us that before opening our hearts again, we must first heal and rediscover our independence. Ethan's role in the story highlights the significance of unwavering support and emotional maturity in relationships. He never pressured Olivia, never tried to fix her, but instead provided a safe space where she could process her emotions at her own pace. This serves as an example for modern relationships, where emotional intelligence and patience are often undervalued. True love is not about forcing someone to move on, it's about walking alongside them until they're ready. Another important theme is the struggle between family expectations and personal happiness. Ethan's family represents the societal pressures many individuals face when choosing a partner. In an era where cultural and generational differences still influence relationships, the story teaches us that while family opinions matter, they should not dictate personal choices. Olivia's hesitation is valid, as family approval can shape one's life significantly. However, the story emphasizes that love should be about mutual respect and commitment, not about meeting outdated societal standards. Ultimately, Olivia's final dilemma mirrors the choices many people face in 2025, whether to let go out of fear or to take a leap of faith despite the risks. In a world where relationships are often complicated by external influences, her story reminds us that love is a decision, one that requires courage, trust, and the willingness to face challenges together. It encourages us to value the people who see beyond our past and love us for who we have become. Olivia Carter stands at a crossroads, torn between protecting the man she loves and shielding herself from the pain she fears will follow. She has fought tirelessly to rebuild her life, proving to the world, and to herself, that she is more than her past. But now, faced with Ethan's unwavering devotion and his family's relentless disapproval, she is forced to make an impossible choice. Should she take a chance on love, knowing it may come at the cost of his family's acceptance? Or should she walk away to spare him the inevitable conflict? This is where you, the audience, come in. Olivia's story is not just about romance, it is about courage, self-worth, and the battle between the heart and the mind. We've watched her rise from betrayal, turn her pain into power, and redefine herself beyond society's judgment. But love is uncharted territory for her, and now she faces a decision that could change everything. So, what do you think? Should Olivia fight for Ethan, knowing that true love is about standing together, even when the world is against them? Or should she walk away, believing that no love should come at the cost of family division and constant scrutiny? What if there is a way for her to prove to Ethan's family that she is more than the woman they assume she is? Should she try to win them over, or is their approval unnecessary? Would you encourage Olivia to trust Ethan and allow him to make his own choices, even if that means tension with his family? This is not just Olivia's story, it's a reflection of the choices many of us face in love and life. What advice would you give her? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us, what should Olivia do next?